Lausanner Bewegung Deutschland. Koalition für Evangelisation.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. And it's a joy to wake up at 3 a.m. and talk with my friends in Germany about what God can do in digital space. So Simon, thank you very much for the introduction to be here. To open confession, I've actually have interacted with Christian maybe off and on for a decade on Twitter. I somehow got connected with the hashtag Digital Church. I believe I'm saying that correctly, and if I'm mispronouncing, I apologize. But have been keeping up with what's going on with the digital church in Germany, honestly, off and on for a decade. And so I love the fact, and I think Christian actually connected me with Simon maybe within the past 6 months or so, and looking forward to even digging in more with both of them and learning about what's happening with the German church and how digital is influencing and growing an influence there. So excited about this talk. So up front, let me say that I, and Simon's hinted at it a lot, I work for a lot of different organizations. In the US, digital is not accepted. And interestingly, a very well-known Christian, an older gentleman, came out publicly and kind of slammed me and my organization and one of my leaders within the past maybe 72 hours. So there is still a lot of distance for us to go to, even in America, to get acceptance towards that. But what's been fun is working with, we use a phrase here in America, and hopefully this makes sense. Globally, we go with the goers. The people that are moving, the people that are wanting to do something digitally, we're going with them. We're going to help them. The naysayers, we don't really pay much attention to them, to be honest. The people that are being difficult, they will continue to be difficult. We will not change their minds other than the mission field. And so the stories that we tell, the life change that we see, the discipleship, the evangelism that's happening, this is our battlefield. And there have been many times where I have been pulled into the arguments of whether or not digital is valid or not in very public environments. And to be honest, you never win those arguments. I don't know that you lose them either. But let's say I had a lot of hair at one point, and now I don't. And much of that probably was lost over stress over some of those arguments. So let's move on. So I've written a book recently. It's not on the topic of today, but what the church looks like in virtual reality currently in America and beyond. And so I told a lot of those stories in there. The link is in the board that was shared earlier. It's at, you can go to thechurch.digital/VR book, and that'll get you, it's a free download. Download it, read it, look at it, hear some of the stories, celebrate what's happening, and maybe get ideas for what this will look like in Germany. I don't know if virtual reality is there yet, but the metaverse is going to offer a lot of new opportunities. And as the technology rolls out, once again, we're finding that some of these churches are reaching 80 to 85% atheists and agnostics, 75% de-churched. We're finding Satanists and neo-pagans that are finding Christ in virtual reality. And we're finding people through a gamer church, people that haven't set foot in a church building in over a decade are coming back to Jesus. And so once again, in this digital space, we really are finding that it's a different type of person that we're connecting with in these digital and metaverse churches. And so be encouraged with what you're doing, the questions that you are asking. I am Rose. I do follow on TikTok. I'm not a content creator, but I'm going to follow you and see what you're doing, because I love the idea of what TikTok is and how there are influencers like Rose that are using that influence, but then pointing that to Jesus, even to the point of pointing it towards a digital expression of church. Just this week, or no, maybe, forgive me, it's 3 a.m. A couple of weeks ago, I met with the top 15 American Twitch streamers. And many of them were gamers, many of them were chatters, a couple of them were cookers where they stream their cooking. but huge influence. And we had an opportunity to sit down with them and talk about using their influence to point towards a Discord community where there would be a church that would be operating within that. And maybe they would build that church. Maybe they would work with others where that church already existed, but would not just use their influence for their own personal gain, but would use their influence for the kingdom. And what was fascinating was, and I was actually very nervous about the conversations that we were having with these streamers, even to the point that I was challenging some of them that maybe it's not about growing one stream, but you should decentralize and start to create multiple streams and build up others underneath them, which, if you know anything about Twitch, that actually takes money out of their pocket, because it's the bigger the stream, the more you can get the sponsors. And by diversifying, we're actually affecting them financially. And what was interesting was almost to the T, every one of them was gung-ho excited about the opportunities of being the church digitally in Twitch and moving beyond just creating content and noise, and instead using their influence for the kingdom. And this is more and more of what we are hoping to see in through the work that we're doing through Digital Church Network. Now, I had a conversation. Actually, I work for one individual, like in two different opportunities, and you may know this name. His name's Dave Ferguson. And if you don't know, that's fine. But he is a lead pastor here in America, as well as works for a global networking organization called New Thing Network, which is one of the roles that I work with. And he also leads an organization called Exponential and Leadership Network, which I work for Leadership Network. So Dave Ferguson's my boss a couple times over, so I have to be nice to him. But the first time I met Dave Ferguson, actually had a conversation. He and I were supposed to have a 15-minute conversation talking about some of the disciple making, some of the multiplication ideas that I had centered around what I wanted to do, with what is now Digital Church Network. See, I wanted to create a disciple making movement that almost works like a micro church strategy, where I'm discipling individuals. I would grow them into leaders that would be planting churches, that would multiply those churches into networks for accountability, and it would multiply those networks into movements. And so I started I sat down with Dave Ferguson. I literally had 15 minutes to do a pitch with Dave talking about what this is. He didn't know who I was. Well, that 15-minute meeting ended up being an hour and a half, because Dave was so caught up into this idea, this strategy, even looking how I was looking. And he said, I've never thought of this before, Jeff, how I was looking at digital not as communication. Instead, I looked at digital as community. You see, really, this is the problem with, at least here in the West, we have no recognition, the church does, of digital as community. We understand how to use it as a communications tool. Every church has a Facebook page. They're sending out an email at some point. They're utilizing social media to point to an event. We can communicate stuff all day long. But when it comes towards using these tools to create community, well, the elder American pastor who ripped me 48, 72 hours ago, he doesn't. Actually, that's the problem, is he's afraid of the community aspects of it, because in his mind, it cheapens the physical interaction. But what Rose knows, and what others are discovering, is that there is community digitally. And honestly, we're not, like, the church doesn't get to say whether the community is real or not. Like, the culture gets to speak to whether it's real or not. And by the way, the corporations, especially in the metaverse, that are spending billions to trillions of dollars to make sure that the metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality, that there's community aspects of that, yeah, they get to decide that. For the church, it's just whether or not we're going to step into that space where we are going to be the church in that virtual, in that digital community. So I'm sitting with my friend Dave Ferguson, and Dave says to me, Jeff, if what you're describing works, have you realized that this is going to be larger than the Catholic Church? To be honest, I had not realized that, and that kind of freaked me out a little bit. And so we're on that journey. I don't listen. I don't know if I'm. It's funny. I tell that story sometimes, and my friends start to call me Pope Jeff, and I'm like, look, I'm not going there. That's not the goal of this. But the idea of helping individuals be on mission and getting them to be evangelistic with their gift and communicate what's going on in their lives. It's interesting. I forget who it is. Maybe it's Saint Francis, Saint Assisi, who says, share the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. Actually, I think that's horrible, because we need to, in 2022, the atheists and agnostics oftentimes have a better personal clout than us Christians. And so we need to be, well, that's problematic in itself, but we need to be sharing Jesus, and we need to be very vocal with what we're doing. And so with in humility, with humility. And so through Digital Church Network, as we're working with people like Rose to challenge them to do something different, and Daniel, to challenge them to do something different, to reimagine what the church is, to look at digital and metaverse communities as communities that are worthy of a church, to reimagine the ecclesiology, not to cheapen what's happening, what the Bible calls the church to be, but instead hold it almost to a higher standard. In many ways, I would actually argue that what our digital and metaverse planters are doing in that space is closer to the biblical ecclesiology than some of our physical church services, once again, at least here in America. And so we're not watering down the gospel. We're just doing something different with it. By the way, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Like, nobody's questioning that. But the opportunity for us to reach a different type of person is magnified, utilizing this digital and metaverse technology. So I sat down with Dave and I was talking with this, and Dave says, "Hey, you know what, Jeff? I got an idea." And Dave has written a book recently. Hey, you know what? I'm going to pull up a white screen here. We're gonna whiteboard something us right now here together. Dave says to me, he says, "Hey, Jeff, I just wrote this book. It's called Bless Practices. And it's this physical process that Dave has used in his church and is rather popular here in the United States, on how to be evangelistic in physical space." And so what Dave, and by the way, I want to publicly acknowledge I'm about to do an acronym and use a bunch of English words, and I have no idea how this translates to Germany. So I appreciate the grace you're going to give the American at 3:00 in the morning who's writing a bunch of American words that may or may not translate. Thank you. So what Dave says to me, he says, "Hey, you know what? The Bless is an idea for how we get people to share their faith in physical space." He says, first off, we need to begin with prayer. Can't spell that. That's awesome. By the way, anytime somebody says, "Hey, why don't you write something in front of 50 people at 4 a.m.?" Maybe rethink that. Number 2 is listen. Number 3 is eat together. Number 4 is share. I'm sorry, number 4 is serve. I beat the punchline there. And number 5 is share your story. So what I love about this is, I mean, let's just look at this from a purely physical standpoint. Before we do anything, we're going to begin with prayer. Our focus before we go up to any conversation, any person to talk about Jesus, is to go before God. Hey, God, be my mouthpiece, be my voice in this conversation. Hey, God, should I be talking to this person yet? Hey, God, help me, Holy Spirit, help me understand how to walk into this conversation. You see, rather than walking into a conversation where we're sharing Jesus from an aggressive standpoint, where we know the answers, beginning with prayer puts us in a place of humility. It's interesting. Here in America, there was a stat that came out. It was either 53 or 57. I think it was 57%. 57% of millennials do not agree with evangelism. 57% of Christian millennials do not agree with evangelism. What's interesting is the same report shows us that 60% of millennials want to share their faith. Now, actually, the report really dug into this. How can 57% don't like the evangelism, but they're okay sharing what their personal faith? And what came of that, and once again, this is an American stat, it's all about the posture. The millennial doesn't want to shove Jesus down someone that doesn't want to hear it, but they're all about sharing what the effect of what Jesus is contextually through relationships. And beginning with prayer is a huge first step in positioning us in a place where we can be open to the Spirit's guiding and have it not be about ego or platforming or getting somebody to think that we are, and instead positioning us in a place of humility with that. Listening, by the way, is step number 2. So as we're going up to that conversation, we're having a conversation with our friends via Facebook, Facebook Messenger. We're walking up to a complete stranger in virtual reality. Really, the first thing we're doing is listening. Where are they? What's going on? Honestly, you're collecting information for the Holy Spirit to do in your own personal life. But more than that, there's an opportunity here. It's funny, even in the virtual reality. I was actually talking with a virtual reality pastor Wednesday, and the pastor says to me, he says, "Man, sharing Jesus with a stranger in virtual reality is really hard because you don't get the physical tells. You can't read the body or you can't read the face to know what's going on." And so sometimes I'm walking up to these people in virtual reality and having a conversation, and I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know if it's going well or if it's not going well. And I said to my friend, I was like, well, what if you listened first? Like, instead of just walking into the conversation blindly and talking, what if instead you positioned yourself where you were asking questions? Instead of reading the physical facial reactions or their body language, you're listening to their voice. You're listening to the timbre. Are they annoyed? Are they enjoying the conversation? You're positioning the person ahead of you. By the way, this builds relational equity. So much of evangelism, moving forward in 22 and beyond, to be honest, it's not. This is the struggle, at least with the American church. The American church would view, and in the past decades, I mean, let's go back 20, 30 years, even some stuff Billy Graham. The idea of accepting Jesus, of having a relationship with Jesus, was a rational decision. Like, it's a mental decision to do that. I have to academically prove that Jesus exists to a person. I have to do that. And in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, maybe that worked. In 2022, it's moved from rational, and instead it's moved towards emotional. And to get people to decide to follow Jesus, to get people to decide to become a Christian, is not a brain decision, it's a heart decision. And it's become emotional. That emotion is driven by relationships. And so for us to get to understand people, for us to get to be able to communicate at that emotional level, we need to have a relationship. And that relationship, especially if we don't know who that person is built by listening. That's where the relational equity comes in for that person to keep having the conversation about Jesus. All right, so we're beginning with prayer, we're listening, we're eating. And by the way, beginning with prayer digitally and in the metaverse, I mean, let's be honest. And maybe some of our friends don't understand this, but prayer is prayer. When it's funny when people ask me, or when somebody posts like in a group text or something, hey, my best friend just died, my mom's got stage 5 cancer. Like, when those things come in, and people do like the prayer emojis, or people do like, hey, I'm praying for you. Like, when that comes up, more often than not, almost all the time, like, I will literally type a prayer in the text. I don't know if you do, or if you've ever gotten one of those, but I'll have people come back to me, wow, I didn't know you could do that. Well, of course you can pray. Of course you can. I mean, literally, this technology, even on the listen side, is designed for a two-way conversation. What I actually don't like of this next 30 minutes is that I'm not able to hear from you. Like, I actually, if there's questions and stuff, like I wanted to come into the chat because I wanted two-way this conversation. I'm looking to forward the Q&A at the end. So beginning with prayer, praying digitally, of course. Listening digitally, yes, you can do that. Eat. So Dave Ferguson tells me eat, and I'm like, I don't understand why eat. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, okay, in virtual reality, we can eat virtual food, pixelated, but like what digitally, what am I supposed to like eat a hoagie in a Facebook group? What hoagie is a hot dog. That probably doesn't translate. Sorry. So, but it's what do we do here with this eat? What, Dave, when you say eat, what do you mean eat? And Dave tells me he's like, eat is all about intimacy. It's authenticity. You are sitting down without an agenda and you are having a dialogue with each other. So listening is you learning about the person. Eating in physical space is inviting to lunch, inviting to a coffee house, sitting down at a Starbucks or whatever you drink in Germany, and meeting a person in physical space and getting to know them at a deeper level. How do you do that digitally? So this is what we did. We invited in Dave, and we invited in 15 to 20 digital and metaverse church planters and physical pastors that are doing digital ministry. And we asked them that question. What in the Sam Hill does eat do? It's interesting. Daniel said friggin', so I have now permission to say that as well. How do we friggin' eat in digital space? And it's interesting. A video game pastor, a pastor who runs a video game church, says, hey, you know what? For me, that level of intimacy, it's nothing to do with eating. It's when I'm playing video games. And another guy who runs, this is interesting, he runs a barbecue church, Barbecue Assemblies of God. I promise you, this is a legit thing, and it's actually working. This guy's like, hey, you know what? Like, for me, when we get to that level of intimacy, it's when we jump on a Zoom call and we start talking about like cooking barbecue. The room started talking about this, and we realized it wasn't about the act of physically eating as much as it was sharing experiences with people in digital and in metaverse space. Like, I had a guy that literally has shared Jesus over 2,000 times with people in virtual reality. We'll just walk up to a random person in a world called VR chat and just start talking with them, doing essentially this practice in the metaverse. And he says, yeah, like if the relationship goes well, I invite them and like we go over we play some game together, Population 1, which is like the Fortnite of virtual reality. And he's like, yeah, and that's the experience. We'll go walk around a world together. I had another guy that created a prayer garden, and he hangs out in there, and he shared Jesus hundreds of times and has prayed for people on a regular basis. And for him, it's that experience. And so when we look at these digital and metaverse tools, you know, whether it's the headset, whether it's the phone, whatever we're utilizing, the metaverse is literally the age of experience. This is where we're going. And so for us to emotionally connect with people, to build that relationship, it's all about shared experience. Now, what's interesting is after you pray for them, after you listen to them, after you experience something with them, number 4 here is serve. Talk about humility. Like, I am building this relationship. I'm strengthening the bonds. I'm showing that this person has value by beginning with prayer, by listening, by doing shared experiences together. I'm not just flying in here sharing Jesus, like going off crazy with someone. I'm building a relationship utilizing this digital and metaverse technology that gets me to the place where I'm not even talking about Jesus at this point. I'm serving that individual. So what does serving look like digitally or in virtual reality? It's interesting. When I've got a bunch of bobbleheads behind me, and and if you like here, I'll just call this out. This is a bobblehead. I don't know if these exist in Germany. This is actually Ronald Reagan, president of the United States in the 80s. I talk about Ronald Reagan a lot in some of my streams. He said a quote once, and this has really been the motivating factor for my life in recent years, aside from Jesus. But Ronald Reagan says, "There's no limit to the amount of good one can do, as long as he doesn't care who gets credit." And so I said that, and then this thing showed up in my mailbox. Somebody sent it to me because they heard it and they thought, "Oh, Jeff likes bobbleheads. Let me send them a Ronald Reagan bobblehead." I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding. Like some strange person, someone I know who it is, but someone I've never met in physical space sent me a Ronald Reagan bobblehead doll because I collect bobbleheads. That's a level of serving. When I had COVID, people I didn't know were sending me DoorDash, food, candy, drinks delivery to my house via mobile apps. I'm assuming DoorDash is in Germany, maybe not, but it's the use your app to buy the food. The person's in four or five states away and is sending me my favorite candy and feel better food because I had coronavirus, and he was serving me in that way. So when you're serving somebody in physical space, hey, I can tell your yard needs to get mowed. Let me mow that. Hey, why don't you leave me the kids and you guys have a date night? Hey, I was at the coffee house and I was buying a bunch of donuts here. I bought you a set. Happy Saturday morning. Like serving can look like that in physical space. Do we even realize at this point what serving can look like digitally? What serving can look like in virtual reality? Like, have we wrestled with this technology as Christians to the point that we really have opportunities? See, I think that this is where we use the phrase missional imagination a lot. Missional imagination, and once again, I have no idea if this is translating. Missional imagination is the idea that someone like Rose or someone like Daniel who has a crazy idea for the kingdom. Let's do it. Let's explore it. Let's use your imagination for missional purposes. Let's just make sure it connects to the kingdom. What is God calling you to do? Thank you for that, Simon. I appreciate that. So what is God calling you to do, and what does that look like? So in these moments where you've prayed for someone, you've listened to them, and you've built experiences, you've experienced things together digitally or in the metaverse, using your missional imagination, tapping into the Holy Spirit, starting to ask questions, how can I serve this person in a better way? I have seen some crazy ideas come up, and I know that as the more that we stay attuned to the Spirit and stay focused on the individual, we're going to be seeing more and better things happening as a result of this. And after you begin with prayer, after you listen, after you eat, after you do experience together, after you serve, here's where you share your story. Share your story of Jesus and share your story about what Jesus has done in your life. Realizing that it's no longer about the rational. To be honest, and if there's any pastors in the room, I hesitate to say this, your influence has actually never been as small as it is today. Actually, I can say that about the American church. In fairness, I don't know that I can say this about the German church, but I have the unfortunate reality that I have to tell pastors that all the time. And so for pastors, and I'm encouraging them, the American church has been in such decline that it really is no longer about the sermon. If we're going to be effective, and stats are showing this, people that have spiritual questions, people that are far from God that have spiritual questions in America, they go to two different places to get the answers to their spiritual questions. They go to YouTube, they go to Google. Literally, they Google the spiritual question and come up with the answers. By the way, do you think the church comes up? No, because the church doesn't know how to do SEO, and their YouTube is horrible. And these people that are spiritually lost, looking for spiritual questions, they go to their friends who they think may have spiritual answers. So lost people are not going to the buildings. They're going to individuals. And as we're looking at not a rational mindset, but an emotional mindset on how to connect those lost people to Jesus. Is it more effective for the building to be the one that's sharing the gospel? Or is it more effective for us as individuals, as Christians, to answer those spiritual questions as best as we can? Realizing it doesn't have to be eloquent. It needs to be heartfelt. This is why bless, whatever the connotation of this in German, this is why it works. Not that it has to be all about eloquence and Bible knowledge and memorizing and all of these things that are very important for the Christian walk. But as we're talking with people, really the idea of evangelizing people, it is far more focused in this idea of how can I build a relationship with someone, utilizing these tools, engaging in this community, and for that purpose, pointing not mass numbers of people, but pointing this individual person that I am building a relationship to the kingdom. So this is the picture that Dave Ferguson, when he hears this, he says to me, Jeff, if this actually works, this will be bigger than the Catholic Church. We are less than 1 year in. And I literally, the book is publishing in January. And so we're writing a book on this, the idea of what a digital missionary will look like and how to be that individual digital missionary. We're not aiming it at church leaders because honestly, here in America, church leaders, hey, that's nice. Let's talk about broadcasting our church services online. The idea of being missional with this space, with these tools, is lost in many ways here in America, except for the few that are passionate about this. And we are going with the goers, going with those that are heading strong in that space. Well, I hope all that made sense. I would love to take some questions, Simon. I'm not sure how you want to run this, but thank you. Thank you all very much for the time here.